So first, obviously, because you were able to prep with stats and stuff, when you say a sweeping generalization, can you cite some of your statistics? Because I'm not aware with like the crime rate. Don't think that's reflected in the stats. However,
Pew.
Okay, I could say Pew, and I could say the sun is like orange or
Pew Research Center. Sorry, when I say Pew, I mean Pew.
I know
Research
what Pew Research, but I could cite something random and say I found it at Pew. That doesn't make it true.
We said cite your sources, so I thought you wanted.
Yeah, but okay, who's the author? When was it?
Hey everyone, so good to have you back on the channel. Today we're stepping into one of those rooms where the temperature rises fast because it's one liberal host sitting across from a circle of conservative women, and she's brought a single bold claim with her, that supporters of the current movement have walked away from everything conservatism is supposed to stand for. What starts as a calm prompt quickly turns into a back and forth over family, faith, foreign policy, crime, and what these women actually believe in. And let me tell you, nobody in that room backs down quietly. Stick around all the way through, because the strongest exchanges aren't where you'd expect them, and one moment near the end completely flips the room. Before we get rolling, drop a comment and let me know what part of the world you're tuning in from. I genuinely love seeing how far this channel reaches. Alright, let's get into it.
Hi there. So I'm a former Democrat, and the Democrat Party has gotten so haywire that I find myself way more comfortable aligning with conservative values. You brought up the Bible. Let's talk about Samson and King David, who were flawed individuals, but turned out to be incredible leaders. I'm not picking my president based on his human flaws. And by the way, did you know that he has fantastic relationships with each of his ex-wives? All the children get along. You just look at his children and grandchildren and how they absolutely adore him. You cannot say that about the Biden family, but I don't even want to split hairs. The bottom line is, what Trump has brought back to the American people is peace through strength. And when you have accountability, and you understand that diplomacy doesn't often work with bad actors, but deterrence does. I feel safer under law and order. I feel safer under accountability, and I am a Trump supporter all day.
Do you feel safer knowing that the FBI had to release a statement that Iran was setting up drones to attack the California coast as a result of his war? Does that make you feel safer or less safe?
So I think the FBI and the DOJ have a lot of corruptions under both administrations.
So they just lied about that?
No, I mean, again, you're not responding to what I've said.
What do I need to respond to?
Yeah, so peace through deterrence. Trump was handed a mess in 2024. Biden lifted sanctions in Iran. October 7th in Israel never would have happened.
Actually,
the war
Trump
in Ukraine and Russia.
Hold on, Trump lifted the sanctions from Iran.
No,
he left the JCPOA.
No,
yes, you did.
What is the reason? Okay, let Dominic take this. This is her.
It was actually the Biden administration in the summer of 2016. So with the hostage exchange, 6 million of sanctions were given back to Iran, and then 10 million from Iraq were lifted.
So the JCPOA was pulled out of by Trump.
Yeah, but that's totally different.
That's the sanctions that we're talking about.
No. The legacy of the Obama administration, there was an expiration date and there was not a renewal. So those are two separate things.
So Trump pulled out of the JCPOA,
but that's not
which was the
sanctions.
Those were the sanctions that were holding them accountable and making sure that they didn't develop.
No, that wasn't sanctions. It was a series of checks and balances for the regime. Which
why did they agree to those checks and balances?
Because Obama released $1.7 billion to the regime. They never complied with the JCPOA. That's why Trump didn't pursue renewing it. There was a clause that ended. They didn't renegotiate for it. So Trump didn't end it. There was no renegotiation. The sanctions that were lifted were under the Biden administration.
So I'll continue on law and order. Did you know that in 2025, crime has drastically decreased in record numbers? And that is not by accident. When Trump came down hard in cities like Chicago, D.C., and New York, police refunding works. Law and order works. It protects all Americans.
Did you know that crime has been decreasing steadily every single year since like 1960?
You have to understand something about what just happened here, because it's the smartest move anyone made in this entire conversation. The host walks in with a giant list of personal flaws, expecting everyone to crumble and start defending a man's character. And instead, one woman calmly says she's a former Democrat who drifted right because her old party stopped making sense to her. That is the part people miss. She didn't take the bait. She refused to argue about whether one person is a saint, because that was never the real question. And then she drops the line that I think is genuinely powerful. She says what's been brought back is peace through strength, and that she feels safer under accountability, and that she's a supporter all day. Now, agree or disagree, here's why this lands. She moved the entire debate from gossip to governance. She's not defending a personality, she's defending a principle. And the host never fully recovers from that pivot. But the moment that really got me is the Iran exchange. Because this is where preparation shows. When the conversation turns to sanctions, Dominique steps in and lays out the actual mechanics. She points out that money was released to the regime, that there was never full compliance, and that's why renewal wasn't pursued. And here's the educational piece people forget. That nuclear framework from the previous decade always had built-in expiration clauses, what experts called sunset provisions. Critics warned for years that those timers meant the restrictions would simply dissolve on their own. So the conservatives aren't inventing anything. They're pointing at a structural flaw that was debated publicly back when the deal was signed. And then the host pivots again, this time to crime, and asks if it's really been dropping since the 1960s. Watch what happens next.
Can't ignore the drastic drop.
Does that not matter?
No. It's actually not true. It's not. Has been studying. That's
true.
In many black neighborhoods like Chicago, it's literally kids can't play outside. So I'm sorry that you live in a bubble and you don't understand the suffering in certain communities.
My husband grew up in a homeless shelter, so I don't prefer that not be weaponized
a homeless
against
shelter.
Yes, a homeless shelter. So I hear that you guys have some central conservative values that I believe that you guys genuinely hold. The problem is, I don't know how you hold them and simultaneously support Trump. I'm not saying become a Democrat. I'm saying if you have these conservative principles, like so many conservatives, you must be anti-Trump because he isn't fulfilling limited government, nuclear family. He's not really fulfilling law and order. He's not fulfilling federalism.
First of all, you suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. You're obsessed. You are obsessed with Trump. Trump is the figurehead for MAGA, but that's not all.
President?
Wait. First of all, you keep interrupting me. And that's why you have Trump derangement syndrome.
That's not why. I actually am interrupting you because we talked about how last session everyone was monologuing. So I'm interrupting to move the flow. I can interrupt less if everyone would prefer, but I'm interrupting because of the results of the last one.
As a black American, there's no way I could support the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party destroyed black American families, which I was trying to discuss before, pumping free sex feminism. White liberal women need to take responsibility for pumping free sex feminism, sexual liberation. The Democratic Party destroyed black America by pumping mass immigration, illegal aliens. We know the data on this since the late 1800s. Mass immigration destroys black America. The reason why I support Trump, He's mass deportation is a good thing.
He's deporting less than Obama.
But for liberal women.
Thanks for pointing that out.
But for liberal women.
I'm not for open borders. You probably shouldn't assume that about me, right?
But for liberal white women in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, precluding ICE from deporting illegal aliens, getting in the way. Liberal white women have destroyed black America since the 1960s, and we've had enough. Black America has had enough of it. And Trump, listen, liberal progressive policies.
I'm not talking about liberals. I'm talking about Trump and
because you're suffering from Trump derangement syndrome.
I don't need you to be a liberal. I need you to tell me why Trump hasn't abandoned all of your values.
And we said the most important value is a traditional family. Liberals believe in transgenderism.
This is the part that blows my mind, and I need you to sit with it. The host tries to wave away the crime point by saying it's been falling since the 60s. And one of the women fires back with something you cannot argue with from a spreadsheet. She talks about neighborhoods where kids genuinely can't play outside, where her own husband lived in a shelter. That's lived reality colliding with a statistic. And here's what people don't realize. Numbers averaged across an entire country can be completely true and still tell you nothing about a single block in a single city. Both things can be real at once, but only one side was talking about the people actually living it. Then the host makes what I think is her core mistake. She says the problem is she doesn't understand how anyone can hold conservative principles and still support this president. And that is when it gets called what it is. One woman says she's obsessed, that it's derangement. Now I'll be honest, I don't love that phrase as an argument because it can shut down conversation. But here's the thing, it landed because the host had just spent 10 minutes proving she literally could not separate policy from the person. She kept saying, I'm talking about the man, while everyone else kept saying we're talking about the movement and the values. And then comes the moment that reframes everything. The black American woman says plainly there is no way she could return to her former party, that in her view it damaged the very communities it claimed to protect. Whether you agree or not, you have to respect what's happening. She's speaking from inside an experience, not down at it. And the host keeps trying to redirect to one individual while these women keep pulling it back to lived outcomes. That gap, person versus principle, is the entire debate in miniature.
need you to be a liberal.
Right. But
So stop making the argument.
But you're looking
I'm
at,
not trying to say you should all be liberals.
No, but you're
I'm
looking
saying
at, you're
he
taking
doesn't stand by
Trump,
your
you're
values.
taking Trump as an individual, as the leader of the MAGA
of your
party.
Republican government.
Yeah, you're taking.
Probably embody some of the things that we're talking about, at least
So what do you-
policy-wise,
IVF,
right?
incentivizing
And
tax.
abortion?
He's getting IVF to be covered under health insurance. That's
great.
supporting
I actually
families.
love his tax
okay.
credits. Yeah.
Wonderful. The other thing he's in the tax credits, every time there's a new baby, it's $1,000 tax credit. How is that not supporting families?
I think that
How
is
is that not as encouraging
I think that's a
families?
small level, but I would say one thing that's not helping families is completely destroying the economy through a tariff system that he's utilizing to line
so
his pockets
he's been in
and
office for 1
increasing
year. He's been in office
and
for 1 year.
increasing debt. You're right. And in a
Yeah.
single year, did you
Yeah.
know? Here's a crazy fact for you. But from JFK all the way to Trump's first presidency and Biden, Trump has lined his pockets. He has made more net worth growth in 1 year, 5 times than the entire
Really,
cumulative
because he
wealth
doesn't take a
growth.
salary. He doesn't need to do this for money.
So first, obviously, because you were able to prep with stats and stuff, when you say a sweeping generalization, can you cite some of your statistics? Because I'm not aware with like the crime rate. Don't think that's reflected in the stats. However,
Pew.
okay, I could say Pew, and I could say the sun is like orange or it is
Pew
orange.
Research Center. Sorry, when I say Pew, I mean Pew.
I know
Research
what Pew
Center.
Research, but I could
Oh,
cite
okay.
something random and say I found it at Pew. That doesn't make it true.
We said cite your sources, so I thought you wanted.
Yeah, but
my sources.
okay, who's the author? When was it?
I don't know specifically.
Okay.
Does anyone
So-
ever memorize Pew Research
Well,
Center?
if you're going to cite a statistic that's broadly speaking.
Not usually. If you say who has your source, and I say Pew Research Center, you can't now further narrow it.
The claim is zero sum. It's that MAGA has Trump has abandoned all conservative principles. But I don't believe that's to be true. So tariffs, for example, bringing economic industry back to the United States, conservative principle. Reestablishing deterrence, peace through strength, conservative principle. The family, the tax cuts, IVF as an example, conservative value, family values. Reinstating deterrence with the border and deportations. Those are all conservative values. So you can't say Trump has abandoned all values. I can concede that there's some that I might not agree with, but that's not the prompt. The prompt is,
Oh, this ending is gorgeous, and I have to start with the part that made me laugh out loud. The host spends the whole segment demanding everyone cite their sources, real rigorous stuff, who's the author, when was it published, and then she gets asked for a source and just says a research center's name. And one of the women hits her with the cleanest line of the day. She basically says, I know that name too, but I could claim I found anything there and it wouldn't make it true. That is the standard getting flipped right back around. You don't get to demand receipts and then hand over a blank piece of paper. And here's what people don't realize about debate. The fastest way to lose credibility is to hold others to a rule you won't follow yourself. But the real knockout is structural, and it's so simple it's easy to miss. The entire premise of this conversation was that the president abandoned conservative values. All of them, and one woman just calmly dismantles the word all. She points to family tax credits, to IVF coverage, to bringing industry back home, to border enforcement, and she says you can disagree with some of it, but you cannot say all. Because the moment you say all, you've made an absolute claim, and a single counterexample collapses it. Here's why this matters, and why it's a lesson for all of us. Whenever someone builds an argument on a sweeping word, always, never, every, they've handed their opponent the easiest possible win. It's an old principle. Even centuries ago, debaters knew that the broadest claim is the weakest one, because it only takes one exception to break it. The host built her entire prompt on the most fragile word in the English language. And by the end, the conservatives didn't have to prove the president was perfect. They only had to prove he kept one conservative value. And they listed several without breaking a sweat. That's not winning on volume. That's winning on logic. And honestly, that's the most satisfying kind of win there is. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.